Hello, in this video tutorial, I want to talk about some tips and tricks that I've learned in writing grants. Now, I've been writing grants for several years now, and along the way, I've picked up some things that I wish someone would have told me when I first started. So this presentation is going to be all about just some of the things that I've picked up and maybe some tips that will help you in the future. So first things first, tips when we're talking about grant writing can be incredibly useful, but the problem is that the grant writing is a huge process. There's a lot that goes into grant writing, and it really depends on the type of grant that you're applying for. If you're applying for a high-end university size style research grant, you have to have multiple partners, multiple institutions supporting you, et cetera, et cetera. If you're applying for a smaller classroom style grant, the workload is less, but you have to be more descriptive on what your actual goals are. And we'll talk about those in a minute. So the advantage of writing grants, obviously, is the funds that you bring in with you. But not only that, you bring in extra value into your school. So in many cases, administrators, principals, they tend to look at you like you have gold bars because you're able to actually bring in extra monies for their schools. So again, it always helps, again, to have that in your back pocket to be able to bring in extra funds and sources. Plus, it helps you do more inventive and creative things in your classroom when you bring in those funds. So work. As you can see here, I got some pictures of paperwork. Obviously, there is paperwork involved, but really, it's not that bad once you get in the habit of doing it. And another thing to remember is that if you don't get the grant the first time around, you can always save your submission and then tweak it and then resubmit it. I always like looking, if I didn't get the grant, I always like to look to see who won the grant, what their proposal was, and then next year I try to apply for that same grant again, tweaking it to kind of fit what the reviewers were looking for. Start small. You don't want to go for the big money first. If you've ever noticed, everybody starts playing the lottery when the jackpot gets really, really high. It's actually better for you to go for the smaller scale grants because there's, believe it or not, less competition. People seem to look at small money and they think, oh, it's just too much time to put in an effort for that small amount of money. I'm not going to do it. So the participation pool is smaller, believe it or not. So start small. Always follow directions. It doesn't matter what the directions say. If the directions are as precise as use Times New Roman 12-point font, do that because that's what they're looking for. Ideally, what they want to see is that you are able to follow the directions because they're going to give you this money. They want to make sure that you will be good stewards of the money and that you're not going to basically just go off and not use the funds like you're supposed to. So again, one of the ways that they measure that is making sure you can follow the simplest of directions. Being poor is not so bad. Now, I want to kind of preface this with some information here. I've reviewed several grants for Florida for the Department of Education. It's a statewide grant program that they do. And one of the things that I've really kind of picked up on is that a lot of schools systems or a lot of individuals who write grants will highlight that their county or their community is poor. Well, that's great. The problem is that that's as far as the actual proposal goes. It's one thing to be poor. It's another thing to be poor and actually have a plan. So, for example, highlighting that your county is poor is one thing. But if you highlight that your county is poor, your students have low reading levels, and that you have a plan to help solve that, you are more likely to get your grant because you have a well thought out plan. You've identified the problem and you've identified the solution, and you have a path to getting to that solution. So again, being poor in a poor county is not necessarily a bad thing, but it doesn't give you a leg up like a lot of people think. In fact, you're actually at a disadvantage if you don't have a clear-cut plan to be able to kind of fix or solve the problems that you're trying to with the grant. So again, have a problem, have a solution, and provide a path to get there. You need to talk about the need, of course. So for example, if your students are not reading at grade level like they should be, maybe implementation of some technology, maybe Kindles or something along those lines that students can take home that are loaded with textbooks or books that are at their reading level, giving them more access to it. That's an opportunity for the students, again, to have access to textbooks because their school's poor. They don't have the money to purchase textbooks. The device is lightweight, it's easy to carry, it's novel, students like it, and it's an easy way for kids to have books and text in their hands. So again, that's kind of like a really short little example of what you should be thinking about if you're writing a grant. Again, Don't think about just technology. I need iPads or I need Chromebooks. You need to talk about why you need them and how you're going to fix the problems that are happening in your school or in your classroom. Most important, be on time. You'll be surprised at how many people submit applications late, and I can tell you, in being an application reviewer, every application that comes in late automatically goes to the garbage can. We don't even review them. Two reasons why. One, going back to my earlier statement, you can't follow the simplest of directions. How can I trust you to use the money and the resources that I'm giving you? Secondly, it's actually easier because that's one less application I have to review. So all late applications go straight to the trash can. Finish early and submit. Now, in many cases, some organizations will actually allow you to submit your proposal early, and it's important to do that because if you get your proposal submitted early, it gets it in the hands of the reviewers. They know what you're going to be submitting, and they can give you some feedback on it. But it's very important that if you do submit early and get feedback, to get your revised proposal back in on time. Don't wait after the due date thinking that they already reviewed it once, that you get a clean cut and get some extra days. You still have to follow the same rules and guidelines. So getting it turned in at the due date after you've had the prior review actually will help you and put you ahead of other people. Now, this is something that really makes people kind of step back for a second. A successful grant writer is 50-50. That means they've received half the grants that they've applied for. Now, that may seem scary, but that's the reality of grant writing. Many people don't get grants. It's not because the grant that you've submitted is bad or it's a poor idea. It's just that there's some other funds that are available, and maybe more ideas or a better idea is actually has been identified, and they only have a limited amount of funds to help fund the best ideas. Whenever I review grants, they're always fantastic applications, but we always have to pick the top because we only have a limited amount of resources to apply for. But if we had more resources, of course, we would give it to the other reviewers or to the other proposals. But again, don't get frustrated if you don't get the grant. It's not a big deal. Like I said, see what the reviewers selected, see what they funded, and then next year tweak your grant to kind of move towards that direction, and then you'll eventually get it. Finally, don't give up. Like I said, grant writing is tough. It's strenuous. It's a lot of work. But in reality, the payoff is fantastic. Again, if you're doing classroom grants, the workload is not that much. I do recommend during the summer when you have a little bit of free time to look at some classroom grants that you want to apply for. Many of the major companies like Dollar General, Walmart, Toshiba, Google, Samsung, DonorsChoose are all great places to go to find out about grants for teachers. Again, most teachers don't apply for those because they feel like it's too much work. And again, that makes a small pool for you to play in because you have a better chance of getting it. But again, just apply. If you don't get it, it's not a big deal. If you want to continue to pursue that, tweak it and then try it again next year. It's just a process that you continue to do over and over and over again. And one thing that I want to point out is if you're in Tennessee, make sure you check out the Tennessee State Report Card because it does give you information about demographic data that you can use. Again, you can highlight maybe your free and reduced lunch rate or some other indicators of poverty. But again, remember, going back to what I said earlier, don't make your entire presentation or proposal about your school being poor. You have to have a problem and a clear-cut plan. That's what reviewers are looking for. Finally, some grant sites that you can use. Grant Wrangler actually sends you applications, which is kind of nice if you're interested. Dollar General, these are local companies. You actually have a better chance of getting grants from local companies than you do big national companies like Toshiba and Sony and other companies because people are always going after the big dollars. And then finally, donation sites like DonorsChoose is a fantastic way to get funds for your classroom. And that's it. That's the basics of grant writing. Hope you find this useful. These are some of the tips that I wish I would have picked up. And if you are watching this as part of my class, then you're going to start your project on your mock DonorsChoose assignment, which will get you ready to submit a project for DonorsChoose.